So for your Fallout 1 build, the stats you're going to want to choose would be prioritizing agility so that it reaches 10. You will want to have your luck following at a close second at 9 or 10, whichever you can reach based on what you initially give the statistic. Now, you want to choose traits like gifted and fast shot. Fast shot takes away the sniping aspect where you can target certain areas and get like really good criticals from them. But I think it's a acceptable trade-off because your DPS can ultimately be higher towards the end game. Then your intelligence, you just kind of want it to be like at 7 so that you have like a decent skill allocation, but it's not really that big of a deal. Just get it decently high. Then you want to use charisma as a dumb stat because it affects virtually nothing in the game and will not impede you to have low charisma. Endurance, I set at 8 just to have good overall health gain and resistances, but this might be unnecessary. You might just want to set it lower, and then you could give an extra point to luck. And my perception I set to 10 because I figured perception is important for shooting accuracy, but a lot of people also say it's not critical. Strength was initially at 4, or 5, because I took like surgery options, and you can take power armor, you can get it up by 4 points. So having strength high initially isn't really a big need. In a lot of these skills, it's worth noting that if you need some temporary aspect of them to be adequate, you can just set them with chems to be higher or lower, purposefully manipulating it. Like, for example, a lot of people use Psycho in Fallout 2 to drop their intelligence to under 4 so that they can talk with, what's his name? I guess the people in the tanker at San Francisco so they can go to the oil rig early for like speed runs. It's good to factor your special stats in light of the fact that when you're playing the game, there will be certain situations like random encounters that'll raise them. So you might not want to choose something that'll bring your special to where it's like 8, and then you have an encounter that will raise it 3 points if it's like that. Like I said, for temporary situations, you can always just raise your special stats with the chems, but you generally want them to be as high as they can be without having to do that. And you don't want them to go over 10 because it can be a waste in those cases. I'd like to identify the skills that you're going to want to use for such a varied build like this, and essentially, where applicable, you want to take skills that can just be raised with, like skill books that you can buy from Miss Stapleton in the hub, and you want to use those to raise those skills. Small guns is one of those, and if you plan smartly, you can just take those books and keep using them, keep buying them, cycling through the inventory, and then you'll have up to 91 small guns without ever putting a skill point into it at level up. Big guns is another one, and you're namely doing this for accuracy. If you have high perception, you can compensate for perhaps not endgame Fallout 2 type 150% skills to get long distance accuracy. So big guns is kind of a niche skill, but it can be fun to use if you're going for that or if you expressly want to use it. I would say that energy weapons is one you'd want to tag because you want this to be a high skill, and the end game weapons that are efficient with their ammo are energy weapons. There are no skill books for energy weapons, so you definitely want this to be tagged and raise it high. I have mine at 94. Unarmed seems to start fairly high, and there may be one potential for like a dialogue based boost to unarmed, but unarmed you namely want it to get up to 80 because I think it's a component in Slayer. Now, melee weapons I have at 91% because I use the Super Sledge. Throwing is a skill that I do not use often. Nobody really uses throwing often. You can throw spears, throw grenades, and you throw them like a few hexes, but with throwing, you almost have to go far out of your way in Fallout games to make throwing a viable strategy. First aid is a skill that you can raise just with skill books, so you shouldn't raise that. Doctor is similar to first aid, it's just like an alternative. You don't necessarily need either because you can just wait, or you can just take like first aid and then use doctor. You heal a few hit points, but maybe your best way to heal hit points time wise would be like stim packs. Now, you do have sneak, which is kind of bugged in this game, and due to scripted encounters, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. So, oftentimes it's just not practical, but as a non-combat skill, I believe you can get up to a decent level and then just like roll certain situations with save and reload if you need to. Lockpick is a non-combat skill that you might want to tag because it'll help you get into places you otherwise cannot get into, and basically if you have a high lockpicking skill, you can avoid having to constantly save scum and try to get those. Steel is one that it seems like even with a low percentage, you can get the items that you might want, and in any case you don't really need the items you can get from steel. So I would advise against putting any points into that. Traps is virtually useless with power armor, and you don't really use C4 type explosives in this game. Science is another one you can raise solely by skill books, so I wouldn't worry about it. It's almost like a speech-based skill check kind of thing that you barely ever use. Repair is quite important. Repair is quite important for being able to repair the power armor, and consequently that brings us to speech, where speech is something you might want to tag so that you can pass speech checks throughout the game that you might only get once per every time you go to a certain area. You're going to want to have it because you can convince the master to dissemble his plans just with speech alone and a holotape. Barter is quite useless, but by contrast, you might want to have your gambling just high enough so that you could like maybe set the difficulty to easy and save and reload, or use the trick with the 2 keys 1 and 4 to raise your bottle caps through gambling. Outdoorsman is a perk that you don't really need because if you have bad encounters, you might as well just have good power armor to supplant it. As of now, it shows me having 9 luck, 10 agility, 7 intelligence, 2 charisma, 8 endurance, 10 perception, and 8 strength. So to make a long story short, some of these, like perception being 10, might not be necessary, but you could definitely just take those points and put it into what you might need, namely that being your agility and luck being high. If you're going for a pure HDH build, you don't necessarily need 10 luck because Slayer upgrades all of your HDH attacks to critical hits no matter what. For Sniper, it's more of a luck roll, where if you have 10 luck, it'll give you 100%, 9, 90%, and so on. My current hit points are 142, and my perk choices would be toughness at level 3, because if you already know what awareness does or the stats of certain enemies, you can gauge just by memory, and your character is going to be powerful anyway. It doesn't really matter to have awareness at rank 3. Others disagree, but I think you could get by without it in this game since you don't have many perk slots. Now, another perk I chose was bonus move. I believe at rank 6 because bonus move will help an HTH build by giving them more action points to get to their enemy. So given the limited number of perk slots that you have, bonus move can be a really good choice if you want to have a hand-to-hand focus with melee weapons or unarmed. I highly recommend that because if you have 2 extra action points to move, it'll really help you with closing the gap on an enemy that your super sludge might swing somewhere, or if you just have like a regular weapon but you need to get to the enemy, you can minimize the amount of action point usage and make HTH more viable point for point. Now, another perk that I chose was bonus HTH attacks, which gives you reduced action point costs for hand-to-hand attacks. So this perk is really good because combined with fast shot, it'll give you 1 AP cost for a super sledge and perhaps the same for power fist. So if you have that, you can do like 10 hits in one turn easily without action boy, and those hits will do like maybe 20 or 30 damage. With Slayer they'll do like 50, so you can do like 500 damage against an enemy, and the effect is best seen against like Death Claws and the Master because they cannot be knocked back, so you're not wasting any points traveling to the hexes that you need to go. Now, bonus rate of fire is a similar thing, but it mainly helps with taking like a turbo plasma rifle or an alien blaster and making those weapons have 2 action point costs. So with sniper and the damage those weapons do and 5 attacks per turn, you can eke out a reasonable amount of damage in addition to the chip damage that your companions may be able to do. Now, as far as other perks, I chose better criticals, which is a natural choice to maximize your critical chance. Not critical chance, but more so the luck roll for damage. It gives it like a bonus and a potential for instant kills. Now, the cream of the crop of your perk choice will be Slayer at 18 and Sniper at 21. As long as you have the requisite stat and skill levels for each of these, you can choose them, and they are the endgame perks that will allow you to do constant critical damage and just landslide wipe the competition in any encounter or hostile map like the Cathedral. You should keep in mind that your character is going to be almost indestructible by level 21 with the power armor, but your companions are not. They have whatever base armor they have, and you cannot upgrade their armor. There are only a few weapons you can give them, so they're quite strong and powerful against regular, like, human guards of settlements, but against super mutants and the Brotherhood of Steel, those groups do have the weapons to destroy your companions. I think there's value in the fact that an in-game character could take, weaker weapons and use their perks like Slayer and Sniper to make them moderately effective. And I think that's a great aspect of the game, is showing how effective you could be and make it more interesting to not wear armor, but just have good stats and fare well. Nonetheless, I'll be identifying the best weapons from each category. For unarmed, it's probably the Power Fist, despite the cost of having energy cells being used up. If you use up energy cells, it's kind of pointless, because why not just use like a alien blaster? But the benefit with this over a super sledge is that none of the enemies will get knocked back, so you're not losing out on potential to attack them. For melee weapons, I would say nonetheless super sledge is the best weapon that you can get, with it having no ammo cost, so it's reliable, and doing the critical damage of like 50, and knocking enemies back can actually be effective for crowd control and preventing melee enemies from swarming you. Now, for small guns, I'm a fan of the 223 pistol and the 10mm SMG. The any of the weapons with burst fire could be decent, but for a 10mm SMG, you might as well give it to Ian. And I think that probably your sniper rifle is going to fare well. The combat shotgun is the best shotgun among two, so it's an easy kind of challenge to win. But I'd recommend giving one of those to Tico, and then it'll be pretty effective. The ammo's reliable, common, but like I've said, I primarily use the energy weapons by endgame. For big guns, they're all pretty decent. Not quite as efficient as using energy weapons, but nonetheless, they could be fun to use with like rocket launchers. Just the ammo's expensive, it weighs a fair bit, and stuff like that. Miniguns have a burst of 40 rounds used each one. Now, energy weapons, the alien blaster is better than the others. You have the turbo plasma rifle being the best, but the Gatling laser is better in the sense of providing more damage per round at the expense of being less ammo efficient. That is something to keep in mind, perhaps with like Slayer, or not Slayer, but Sniper and your minigun. It might be able to output more DPS when you need it, but like I've said, the enemies are not so tough that they can't be beaten with the weapons that I've used.